Imagine dragging your closest friend back to your ship while he weeps and fights you and begs you to leave him behind. He isn't wounded, he's happier than you have ever seen him in your life. And that is exactly why you have to pull him away. Because this shore offers something so sweet that the moment it touches a man's lips, everything he's fought for just melts out of him. The war he lived through, the people waiting on him, the long road back home. He sits down in the warm sand and smiles as his whole life drains away. No monster did this to him. He chose it, and he would choose it again. This was the very first thing that nearly ended his long road home. And it wasn't a beast, it wasn't a storm, it was happiness. Let me tell you the story from the Odyssey. The war was finally over. For 10 years, Odysseus and his men had fought at Troy. 10 years of mud and blood and burning walls and friends who never came home. And now, at last, it was done. The city had fallen. The ships were loaded. And every man aboard was pointed at the one thing that had kept him alive through all of it: home. For Odysseus, home was a small rocky island called Ithaca, a wife he hadn't seen in a decade, a son he'd last seen as a baby in his arms. After 10 years, he could almost feel the wind coming off his own hills. And then, the sea took it all away. A storm caught the fleet off a cape called Malea, the kind of storm that turns the whole world into gray water and white noise, and it drove them south, off their maps, off every chart any sailor aboard had ever seen. For 9 days, the wind owned them. No land, no stars to steer by, just salt and hunger and the slow grinding fear of men who no longer know where they are. And you have to understand who these men were by now. They were not fresh young heroes. 10 years of war and 9 days of open sea had hollowed them out. They were thin. They were sick to death of salt. They had lowered friends into the waters with their own hands. The only thing any one of them had left was the picture in his head of his home. Now, hold on to that picture, because that picture is exactly the thing this island is about to take away. On the 10th day, they saw green. Land, but not hard, hostile coast. Soft hills, fresh water running down to the sea, sweet air with no smoke of war in it. After everything, it looked less like an island and more like mercy. They ran the ships up into the sand and they drank, and for the first time in a long time, they rested. And Odysseus did the careful thing, the thing that had kept him alive at Troy. He didn't march everyone inland. He picked 3 men and sent them ahead to find out who lived in a place this gentle. The 3 walked up the beach and into the green, and Odysseus sat by the ships and waited for them to come back. But they didn't come back. Here's what those 3 men found. Not a monster, not an ambush, no spears, no walls, no war cries. They found a quiet people who lived on a single plant, a flowering fruit that grew all over the island, and who seemed to eat almost nothing else. And these people did the kindest thing one stranger can do for another. They smiled and they offered their travelers their food. The men ate, and something left them. It wasn't like a blow to the head. Nothing was torn away. It was gentler than that, and worse. The moment the sweetness touched them, they simply stopped wanting. Troy, the sea, the ships down on the sand, the men they'd bled beside, the homes they'd been crawling toward for 10 years, none of it pulled at them anymore. Why would you ever leave? There was sweetness here, sun, soft ground, and more sweetness tomorrow. That was enough. That was everything. Now, you have to understand what that would mean in ancient Greece. To these men, the greatest thing a person could ever do was to come home. They had a word for it: nostos, the homecoming. It's the root still buried inside our word, nostalgia, the ache for a place you've lost. Nostos was the whole point. Every song they sang on the long nights at sea was about a man clawing his way back to his own door. Everything Odysseus is about to suffer through, all of it, is one long act of nostos. And this flower quietly erased the wanting of it. It didn't kill these men. It did something the Greeks may have feared even more. They had another word, lethe, forgetting. And lethe wasn't only a word, it was the name of a river that ran through the land of the dead, a river whose water washed away everything you had ever been. To forget, to the Greeks, was a kind of dying. And those men, sitting in the warm sand with sticky fingers and easy smiles, they were drinking from that river, one sweet mouthful at a time. When the three didn't return, Odysseus went in after them, and he didn't find men in danger. And that may be the part that frightened him the most. He found them sitting in the sand, comfortable, unhurt, smiling up at him like children who'd been told it's time to leave and simply can't understand why they should. He called them by their names, names they had carried into battle, and the names landed on nothing. No shame in their faces, no fear, no flicker of the soldiers who had stood beside him under the walls of Troy. Just sweetness and the sun and a mild, friendly confusion. Just sit with how strange that is. He braced himself for monsters, for storms, for enemies, for a fight to the death. He was not ready for his own men to look up at him, perfectly happy, and not want to be saved. If a danger that wears the face of peace just put a chill in you, good, that's the whole point of this one. Like and subscribe, and let's see what he does about it. What he did was hard, because here was the cruelty of it. His men were happy, happier than the cold sea and the long road home would ever make them. He could have left them there, walked away, let them keep their sweetness and their sun. From a certain angle, leaving them would have looked like mercy. He didn't. He took hold of them, these grown men, these soldiers, and he dragged them down the beach, across the sand, back toward the ships, while they wept and twisted in his hands and reached back toward the green. He hauled them aboard and he tied them down under the rowing benches, bound hand and foot like cargo, so that the second his back was turned, they couldn't throw themselves over the side and swim for the shore. And they wept the whole time, not because they were prisoners, because they were being taken away from paradise. Then Odysseus turned to the rest of his crew, the ones who stayed with the ships, who hadn't tasted it, and he gave them one order: touch nothing on this island, not the fruit, not the flower, not a single bite. Get to your benches, row. And they ran. They threw themselves at the oars and put that gentle green island behind them as fast as the sea could carry them, while beneath their feet, their own friends lay weeping in the ropes. Think about what just happened. The most dangerous thing those men would face on their entire road home, more dangerous than the giant in the cave, more dangerous than the witch, more dangerous than the sea god himself, was a quiet little island that asked nothing of them and offered them everything they wanted. It never tried to kill them. It simply offered to let them disappear, smiling, and never once feel the loss. That is the danger you cannot fight with a sword, because the moment it wins, you're grateful. The green island slipped under the horizon behind them, and in the belly of the ship, men who had survived 10 years of war lay bound in the dark, weeping, grieving for a home they had already chosen to forget. If that's somebody in your life, the friend who dragged you home when you didn't want to go, share this with them. And if you can't get enough of these stories, if you're the kind of person who hates it when a great story ends, there's a whole second Odyssey waiting for members. The chapters I couldn't fit on the main channel, the side stories and the deep cuts. When you join, you help me keep telling them. So thank you truly for that. Right now on your screen is the entire Odyssey saga, every story in one place. One of my favorites, a goddess who turns grown men into pigs with a single cup of wine and the one man she couldn't change. Start at the beginning or keep going. Click it right now, and I'll see you in the next story.